So you've gone from crossing the $8 million mark to the $9 million mark. So that's impressive. Is that in line with what you were thinking? Is it all kind of going according to plan?
Yeah, no, we're doing. I mean, we're further ahead than where I was thinking we would be. I mean, like we're almost at 9.5. I think we'll be at 9.5 at the end of today, which is pretty amazing. But yeah, I kind of my goal. Not when I first started the crowdfunding because I didn't really know what to expect. But once we sort of done so much on the initial campaign, and then I could see it continuing to happen afterwards, I sort of had a feeling that there would be actually a really good chance or shot to essentially crowdfund the whole development instead of having to take as much money on as I thought I would from investors. So I think, it's not 100% the way Minecraft is, because obviously Minecraft was selling an alpha version that you could actually play when he was first monetizing it, but that's kind of what they did, is they sort of had an early version that wasn't considered final, that they were essentially letting people pay for and play, and that was helping finance finish the game off properly. And so I sort of feel like there's a little bit of that happening here, although it's much earlier in the process, because we don't have playable elements yet, although we will do by the end of this year.
So now you've crowdfunded quite a bit more after Kickstarter than you did during the Kickstarter. Is that correct? I mean, it's
yeah. Well, basically of the 9.5, only 2.1 was on Kickstarter, so we're sort of at 7.4 outside of Kickstarter. But the initial campaign, which was a combination of Kickstarter on our own website, that was, I think we did 6.2 by the time it finished, and so that was 4.1 on our own site and 2.1 on Kickstarter. So it was about 2/3 our own site, 1/3 Kickstarter, and then obviously since Kickstarter sort of had finished and our site continued on, our site is now sort of shifted to be, over basically over 75%, almost getting close to 80% now.
So do you think the Kickstarter campaign itself helped kind of spark the hype or the momentum, and then that carried over into your own crowdfunding efforts afterwards?
Well, we actually started on our own before we did Kickstarter, so we were on our own for about 8 days, and then we started Kickstarter. And we'd already, by the time we started Kickstarter, we'd already done $1 million on our own site. So I'm not so sure that Kickstarter necessarily sort of created what was happening on our own site. I certainly think it helped bring more people into the ecosystem. So Kickstarter's got a lot of it's got a community on it, and the community actually just likes finding cool projects they want to back, and they all get together and let their friends know, and it's a very sort of social backing dynamic that happens. I mean, I see it on other projects. You can sort of see what suddenly starts to get interesting, and people will start backing, and that's actually kind of why I have a completely different opinion of things like Veronica Mars, where I know the Zach Braff one, which are not games, but there's been some flack going, well, these people are all multimillionaires, they don't need to panhandle for money, and obviously I've been in the film business, the entertainment side, and so I know exactly how these things happen. And for instance, that Veronica Mars movie would never happen unless Kickstarter made it happen, and it's really for the fans, right? And not only that, I would guarantee that, I don't know, maybe at least 50%, but probably more of the 90,000 people that backed it were like new people for Kickstarter. I mean, it'd be interesting if someone actually got those stats out, but I'm pretty sure that actually brought a bunch of new people into the Kickstarter ecosystem. And then once they back there, then maybe they're like, oh, I like this, and they kind of back some other projects. So I think Kickstarter is a fantastic tool.
Certainly, ever since Double Fine Adventure was funded, it seems like games have been able to fund a lot easier. A lot more games have funded. So definitely that snowball effect of more users and more contributors seems to be taking place. And we've seen a lot of really successful projects. What do you feel contributed to your project's success? What were the things that you did that helped reach such an astronomical figure, really?
So I think having a pretty open, having not much competition was what makes it easy. Like being in, say, an RPG play field, if I'm crowdfunding, is harder because there's a lot of options there. Whereas when I started, there wasn't. I mean, Elite came after me, but at the time I was sort of the big, I guess, space sim project that you could back. And then I think the other thing was that we sort of focused on having I knew it was something that was pretty ambitious, so I sort of had to put something out there that was aspirational, that showed kind of what the game was going to feel and look like. So it wasn't just about me saying, hey, remember me making games back in the 90s, and you like these games, and I'll make another one for you. It would be like, this is what I want to do, and look and see, so you can have an emotional connection to it. So I think having that really sort of helped make it feel much more real, and maybe allowed it to go to a greater level. And then I think there was something that just worked, and it was completely accidental. It wasn't designed, but because I was building a sort of privateer freelancer style game where you sort of collect and build up ships and weapons and outfit your ships, and there's a sort of a kind of economy driven where you essentially want to collect things and sort of build your asset base up. And because we'd offered different ships for different pledge levels, because it was just sort of, I was kind of thinking, well, every time I back a game in a crowdfunding sense, it's like I get offered all these different sort of physical rewards, but it doesn't really relate anything to the game. And really, I'm spending my money for the game, so perhaps we should offer something more in the game for people to spend more money. And I think that was probably one of the biggest reasons why we were able to sort of go up another notch, was that people, and it wasn't intentional, because I was just thinking, hey, look, someone's going to give me $250 versus $30, they probably should get a bigger ship. But I didn't realize that people were actually going to collect the ships. But it turned out, when we first launched the campaign, there was, we were like, why did you buy 5 packages? You've already got a copy of the game. They're like, oh, no, I want to collect every ship. I want this one for trading. I want this one for dogfighting. So I think that the aspect of being able to sort of collect some of the assets that you could have in the game through the crowdfunding kind of made it fun for people. So, in our game, you can earn all this by just playing the game. So obviously people could just buy the $30 game and spend time in the game and build up all these assets. But I think there's a combination of people like to collect now, they're kind of impatient, and they also like the idea that the extra money's helping the development of this thing they really want to see happen. They like getting little rewards for it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it sort of feels to me that like people like to back things, but they sort of feel like they want to get something for it. So the fact that they have a hangar full of different spaceships, it's cool to them.
With your reward tier model, it seems like that would also reduce kind of the Kickstarter overhead. I think when there's a lot of physical rewards, like T-shirts and things like that, I know that a lot of these projects spend a great deal of what they earn just fulfilling these rewards, whereas a better spaceship really doesn't cost you anything. I mean, other than maybe a player not purchasing that spaceship in game.
Yeah, well, it costs us that, assuming, depending on whether it's game content you're going to have or not, if you add extra ships for extra tiers that you wouldn't have done, then the cost of production is there. But virtual items are much better than physical items. So yeah, I mean, I'm actually anything, because ultimately the goal of this is to really help a game get made, whether it's my game or someone else's game. And people don't realize the cost and time that's involved in physical production and fulfillment. It's actually a pretty big time sink. Although, just giving T-shirts, you think, oh, T-shirts aren't much, but you got to go organize them, get them out, and you got to ship them. You got to have someone put them in a package. But all that costs money. So you could raise this money with a lot of physical goods, and it could look like you've got a bunch of money, but a lot of it just gets put away on fulfillment issues. So yeah, I definitely think that having sort of digital items on the fulfillment side is a big plus. And I think it's probably a good way to go for people, because ultimately the goal of what happens here is to get a game get made that wouldn't normally get made. And really also, by the way, yes, it's nice to have some, and we have some nice manuals and blueprints and stuff, but ultimately, I mean, the thing that you're using all the time is a game. So yeah, I think it's kind of like, maybe if I was an RPG game, I get a cool set of armor versus, some with, I don't know, gold filigree or something versus the standard one without that. But yeah, it definitely has the hidden advantage of making the efficiency of the fundraising much better for development reasons.
So between when you were last making space games and when and Star Citizen, how has the technology enabled you to make kind of the game that you had in mind? What has changed? What's made your ambition more realized this time around?
Well, I think, the obvious thing is obviously that the computers are insanely more powerful than when I was last making a game. I mean, just, it's not, when I was last making Freelancer, it's not a matter of 10 times. I mean, it's probably closer to 100 times more powerful. I mean, my iPhone is far more powerful than the PCs I was building Freelancer on. Has a lot more memory, storage, all the rest of the things. And that my iPhone, pales in comparison to my desktop gaming PC. So in terms of the fidelity, like the detail in the ships, the amount of simulation that can happen, just the sheer amount of volume and data and scale, there's a vast difference. So it's allowing me to realize the world in the sort of detail that I sort of see in my head that I would like to sort of feel and taste and adventure around. And then the aspect of sort of online and how everyone everyone's not stuck on dial-up modems anymore, or even DSL. Most people are on pretty fast broadband internet, and people are moving to fiber. So there's an ability to sort of connect you to players in a way that just when I was doing Freelancer, I mean, we did a multiplayer mode, but it wasn't anything compared to what we can do now. So those two aspects just allow to make a much bigger, more detailed, realized world that's also connected. So you can be playing with your friends, or even playing with other strangers, and in this sort of big system world, which I always wanted to do. I mean, it was always my roadmap on Freelancer was I was doing the single player Freelancer first, and then I was going to do sort of the MMO version of Freelancer right after it. And I just never did that because I sold the company to Microsoft and then went off to do movies. But I always wanted to do that, and I sort of feel like I can sort of realize that vision, which is essentially just living in this alternate reality, this future galaxy that you get to adventure around in, which was, I think, kind of my fantasy when I watched Star Wars when I was 8, and I've been pursuing ever since.
Speaking of the multiplayer, I've had conversations with Richard Garriott, who's doing Shroud of the Avatar, and I know you guys have worked together a little bit. And then there's the Destiny game from Bungie. It seems to me like with a project like Star Citizen, it's almost like the next evolutionary step in multiplayer. Like going from the MMO, like super social, thousands of characters running around, to like a more targeted social experience. What kind of has influenced your direction in terms of multiplayer?
I think I mean, there's a game which I think you like, because I remember the article you wrote, first on Star Citizen mentioned it, but Demon's Souls for me was one of the best games I've played in quite a long time, and it's a weird game because it's probably one of the most insanely difficult games I've played in a very long time. So it was both the most frustrating and the most rewarding game that I'd played. I normally don't play a game that much. I mean, I put about 200 hours into it, and eventually just had to stop because I was busy doing other stuff. But I was already through my playthrough plus, which is really unusual for me because I wouldn't even normally do that. They did a lot of things right. And one thing obviously was not making it too easy, which is a problem with I think a lot of current games. But the other thing that was really impressive to me was, and I think they were sort of the precursor to a lot of this sort of shared multiplayer experience, persistent kind of idea that's going on, which is not completely the same way as like a traditional MMO, but it's not so temporary like a current multiplayer on, like if you get on Battlefield or you get on Call of Duty, you play, but nothing really carries on, maybe besides your rank or your ability to upgrade weapons. And so their ability to sort of have this essentially single player experience but you would have additive elements from other players, like you would venture around and you could see, clues, things scrolled on the ground that would tell you, oh, look, there's an enemy, or this is a good sniping point. And the ability for other players to join you to help kill a boss monster, or even for the players to invade your space when you'd come back from your ghost form and you were in your real form. It sort of felt like the evolution of how that's, the blending of the single player with the multiplayer. And that was kind of actually a lot of my inspiration when I was thinking about how I wanted to handle Star Citizen, because, for me, I'm actually not a big MMO player, because I sort of find, a lot of times I just want to get in and have, be my, sort of almost play that sort of single player experience. But I don't, but I kind of like the idea there's other people out there, but I don't want to be forced into these like massive groups to achieve anything. Where you've got to put this party of everyone together to go on a successful dungeon rage, and in the EVE Online, it's even more than that because you have to be part of a massive corp to be sort of achieving a lot of stuff. And so I sort of felt like I wanted a way to craft a game that could still have that sort of personal feeling that you had when you would play Freelancer or Privateer, but also allow for expansion where like you and 4 or 5 of your friends can go and do things together. And if you wanted to go beyond that, you could join up with 50 or 100 other people and form a bigger group. So that's kind of the idea of that sort of shared persistent universe. And a lot of the focus is on that experience. So essentially the way it works in Star Citizen is that we simulate the whole world, irrelevant of who's in it. So basically, these aren't the actual proper numbers, but this for sake of illustration. Say we have 20 million AI bots running around the universe, and we have all our rules in terms of how people buy, sell, trade, manufacture. Some AI are pirates, some are merchants, etc., etc. And basically we simulate the universe and the economy, so it's all happening around you, and it's a bit of cause and effect. And you could play this game with no one else logged on at all, just one person, which in a normal MMO would be the most boring experience ever. In this, it should feel like a privateer or a freelancer. You're wandering around, the universe is all happening, people are doing things around you. And then the idea is, as more people are essentially logged on or joined in, they kick out an AI slot, so to speak. So what would happen is if there is 1 million people playing the game, there would be 19 million AI and 1 million real players. And then as a player, you can sort of set your preferences and say, okay, well, I kind of like the solo experience, and I'm more PvE kind of guy. So you can set your slider to preference to that. And what will happen is a lot of times there'll be a case that the main server can matchmake, and it will say, okay, well, I could put an AI pirate for you to fight or a real pirate for you to fight. And it looks at your settings and go, well, this guy likes to fight, AI because he doesn't really want to be sort of in a PvP world, and it will put the AI there. And if the player was saying, no, I love PvP, it would put the real person as the pirate there. And then, of course, there'll be some areas in space, like the outer areas, where there is the settings don't matter. Like, this is only for like the more safe areas. So if you venture into sort of the wilder areas, then if there's a player out there, it's full PvP and enter at your own risk kind of thing. But the way I've sort of described the system, I think what it will allow you to do is it will allow you to sort of customize your experience to be kind of how you like it, right? So that's my goal. That's for me. I would like to play in a sort of MMO style world, but in a single player style. And so that's how I'm sort of designing the experience. So essentially, it should kind of feel like Privateer or a Freelancer if you play it. If that's kind of the vibe you want. And then if you want to have some of your friends, you could sort of invite them, and they could be on your wing, and sort of gets enhanced. And then also if you want to be part of a bigger group, you can do that. And we're deliberately designing sort of features and roles and things to do in the universe that are built for those 3 play styles, right? So it's not like you have to be in a big group to do anything or to move up in the world. It's like there are things that you can do as a lone wolf, there are things that you can do with a small group of friends, and there are things that you can do with a big group. And they're not, it's not one or the other. It's not one rules the other. It's just kind of what you prefer as a player. And so if I can achieve that on all those different levels, I think I will. That is the kind of game I want to have, because it will sort of allow people to sort of migrate and do the different parts of the gameplay that they kind of feel comfortable doing. You get people playing single player, maybe have some friends, and then at that point maybe you want to branch out. But we don't penalize people for not being part of any social construct. And so that's how I wish MMO games were like, but I can't really find them like that, and that's kind of part of the impetus of the design decisions I'm making on Star Citizen. And I think, it's not like Bungie or me looked at each other's crib sheets, but I think that there's probably there's people out there that have the same feelings that I do on this, and that's kind of why they're looking for this sort of hybrid between the single player experience and an MMO experience, which is really kind of what I think Star Citizen will be.
All right, so kind of to round things out, you have about $9.5 million in crowdfunding, new offices. what's the roadmap from here? Where do you go for the rest of 2013? Where will you be next year?
Okay, well, so one of the other things that we're doing that I think is quite different than pretty much every other crowdfunded game that I've seen out there, although I could be corrected, is that we're approaching the development process in terms of how, what our backers get differently. Where we're sort of approaching, because Star Citizen is a pretty big and it's a pretty ambitious game. I mean, it's going to cost $20 million plus by the time it's all finished. But what we're doing is we're essentially taking components of functionality in the game, and we're going to be splitting them out and letting the community, the backers, basically interact and use them, play with them before the final game's all brought together. And we can. In Star Citizen, it's easier to do than maybe some other games because things are more discrete, right? When you're in space, it's separate than when you're down on the planet and stuff like that. So our sort of roadmap is this August we're going to release the hangar module, which we'll release it at Gamescom. And the hangar module allows everyone that's backed to go in the engine, see their ship in the engine, walk around it with their avatar, get inside it, check it out, invite their friends to their hangar and check their ships out, and probably do some level of customization. And we'll be adding more customization functionality as time goes on. So we'll be iterating on the hangar. And then in December, the end of December, we'll release the dogfighting module, which will allow you to take the ship that you've backed, basically what you've got sitting in your hangar, and go into space in sort of a head-to-head death match against other players or AI. So think of that like a sort of what's the trendy term for it now? MOBA, right? Multiplayer online battle arena. But essentially, that's you would matchmake with other players, or like I said, you could do it against AI and take the ships you've backed and dogfight with them. So there isn't the persistent universe where you can go around and trade and adventure. There isn't a single player story, but it's allowing you to take your ship and dogfight, and that will there's two reasons for this. One is we want the community to get involved early because we've got this great community and we want them to stay with us and not go off somewhere else. But also this iterative development process hopefully will allow us to polish and test things along the way. Because like normally you work on a game for 2 or 3 years and then you sort of throw it over the fence, even in beta, and there's like all these features and functions, and of course there's stuff that goes wrong because it's a very complicated, engineering a game is an incredibly complicated affair. So what we're trying to do is sort of take some of the functionality and actually have public sort of tests and consumption of it, because that's going to force us to make, it'll flesh out like driver issues or video card issues, deployment issues. So it's forcing us also as developers to actually have hard deliverables to the community, so we can't fake it. So a lot of times in development with the publisher, you sort of say, oh yeah, we made a vertical slice, but no one from the publisher is actually like looking at your code and seeing that you completely like gummed it up together at the back to make your milestone, that's a very typical developer trick. Whereas this, when you deliver to the community, you can't get away with it. It's got to work on their machines. So I sort of feel like it's helping us as a developer focus on actual deliverables in shorter periods that are more focused without as much functionality. Because sometimes with a game it can be completely overawing in like everything you've got to put into it. So it's always better. This is the whole idea with Agile and Scrum, where you take smaller deliverables and sort of sprint towards them. But that only really works if the deliverables real. So this is kind of an attempt to make the deliverable be a proper real deliverable. So in December, people will be able to sort of dogfight and play. So they'll actually be able to have pretty close to a World of Tanks style experience there, which will be kind of cool. And we'll be adding ship items and more stuff on there so people can customize their ship. So basically, the hangar will be working in concert with the dogfighting module. And then in the following year, we'll release sort of the planet side module, which will be that's kind of the social module where you go into the bar and talk to other people, buy, sell stuff, upgrade your ship, an alpha of the single player game, and then finally a beta of the existing universe by the end of the year, which essentially is bringing all these things into one holistic piece. And then we'll go live after the beta, which I would anticipate would probably be sometime in early 2015. But essentially from the end of 2014, you should be able to play the full game. We're just it will be beta, because obviously there will still be things to tweak and balance, and we'll try and keep the player base constrained until after we've gone through beta, because it's not really a beta if you've got 1 million players.